Good afternoon. My name is Bob Elias, and as chairman of the Associated Student Speakers Program, I'd like to welcome you to our 19th lecture of the fall quarter. I'd like to announce, before introducing Ms. Winters, that on Monday, although there won't be any advertising on it because there will be no Daily Bruin, we will have Hal Roach here, and he's going to be showing films from Laurel and Hardy, rarely seen films, and he will be talking about probably the greatest team that ever lived, and Harold Lloyd and other comedians of the silent era and the early talkies that he worked with and brought together. Today's speaker, Ms. Winters, started in vaudeville and then later worked in the theater and has done many motion pictures. She has won every award from the Oscar to the Emmy and everything in between. She will be speaking today on the theater as a social force, and a question and answer period will follow immediately. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Ms. Shelley Winters.
I must announce immediately that I'm quite intimidated, not by the building, but by the academic atmosphere. I am sure I'm going to mispronounce everything. I left high school because I got a job in a show, and I'm never ill at ease except when I'm facing you learned youngsters. I'd like to make another announcement so that you can keep it in mind when you ask me questions. I do a lot of films to make money, just as I'm sure that you all make money. That's one of the facts of life. And I get less money for the films that I feel are meaningful and I care about. That's the nature of the entertainment industry. So if you want to talk about my commercial films, which I would rather not talk about, I'll do that. The films which I feel have some to use an old-fashioned expression, social significance, I would be quite willing to discuss those. Why I picked this, can I take my shoes off? I don't know. Why I picked this subject when you asked me to speak is that my attraction to the theater, and my intention was to be a theater actress rather than a film actress, was because I grew up in a very impoverished section of Brooklyn. And I had been taught by my religious training that I was my brother's keeper, and what I saw around me as a youngster made me feel that the inequalities in our society was my responsibility, that my life had to have some bearing on making the world I saw better. When I was quite young, I saw a production of Clifford Odets' Waiting for Lefty. I don't know how many of you have ever seen that. It is a play whose purpose is to move the audience to action. It was about a taxicab strike in New York during the most terrible days of the Depression. And the audience and actors in the audience find themselves compelled to vote and to scream out, "Strike." That play was the most moving experience of my adolescent years, and propelled me into a life in the theater. The theater and I have gone through many metamorphoses. I know the films and the theater have changed. The cool generation, as it were, which I know you're not very cool, but the idea of approaching the emotions through the intellect, which I think is a better idea, started, I would say, with Brecht. And it reflects in the writing. But in those days, the group theater was very active in New York, and I was fortunate enough to have some of the members of the group theater as my teachers. I went to both the New School of Social Research and the New Theater School, which has since gone out of business. And I also was very lucky in having my first acting teacher had been a member of the Moscow Art Theater. Her name was Nadia Romanoff. And for my first year of studying theater, I wasn't allowed ever to say anything. I spent a month being a kangaroo. And believe it or not, to this day, I approach every role with the physical limitations of being a kangaroo. It sounds sort of strange, but the very idea of putting yourself inside inside an animal's body has given me a preparation for every role that I've played. I have long felt that the theater and films are the vanguard of our society. As example, the problems of black people many years ago with Native Son. Black citizens problems were first articulated in the theater. The problems of homosexuality first discussed in the theater. I can't remember the play, but it was many years ago. And I think that's right. I think the theater must be free. And it should be true of film and television too, but it isn't. But in my growing up years and in my preparation, I found this to be true. You have very young classes here, no? But the connection between what you do and what happens in the world is I feel, the most important thing for an artist. Now, you might say to me, well, how can you do things just for money? Well, I do. I try to bring these two opposite things together as often as I can, but there's no way to make any social comment on the Tim Conway show. And I needed the money. There just is no way. When I can, I do. And during a long career, and if you want to have a long career, I think that's something you feel compelled to do. At this point, I'm in the throes of a strike myself. I've written 3 one-act plays which are being done off-Broadway. It's called The One-Night Stands of a Noisy Passenger. And I don't know whether the critics will tell me I should stick to acting or like 'em. When the present off-Broadway strike is over, it will open. I am doing a film, so I haven't been able to give this morning's talk as much concentration as I would like to. There are many things I would like to tell you, but I think perhaps if you ask me, I will be able to answer more clearly. So feel free to ask me anything you want to. Right?
We have a mic, which we will take to you. Could I please ask you to wait for the mic before you ask the questions, because we are taping this and we do want to get the question on tape. If I may, I'd like to start the question. I have something I'd like to ask you.
Sure.
And something else which I hope they'll ask you, but if they don't, I'll ask you. One question is, you were just in the Broadway production of Minnie's Boys, right? Or you were involved in that.
Yeah.
Could you tell me a little something about the Marx Brothers, or the preparation you did for this film? Did you meet with Groucho?
That was a show.
Yes.
Yes.
And you know, how did you prepare for this show? Did you meet Groucho? How did you get into the mother of the Marx Brothers?
All right. You've asked me about one of my failures, and I don't mean a financial failure. It was a very sad experience because Minnie Marx, the mother of the Marx Brothers, was a remarkable woman in her time, and I did enormous research. I read everything that was ever written about her, talked to from everybody from Jack Benny to Xavier Cugat, anyone who ever knew her. And she, and I guess it was in the early 1900s, had 5 sons. One was playing the piano in a brothel. That was Chico. Harpo, everyone thought was retarded because he was in a state of fear, and he was a bellhop at an old hotel that still stands. Her husband was a romantic drifter who could not make a living, and her family was in serious financial and they were in and out of jail. Unfortunately, Groucho controlled the material that was to be shown on the stage. He'll be very angry with me about this, but it's true. This is the nature of this business. And what was presented to me was a script which I was told, I thought the music was quite beautiful, and since Oklahoma had not done a musical on Broadway, and it seemed, well, when you walk into the theater, you know the 4 Marx Brothers are going to become stars. I mean, you don't have to wonder about that. But the nature of the material, because I guess people who knew Minnie Marx and her children are still alive, they would not present a clear picture of what really happened. She grabbed her sons, dragged them out of the ghettos of New York, got a house in the suburbs of Chicago in the country, and threw them into vaudeville, where they didn't even want to be, and felt they had no special talent for. She created 4 geniuses or 3 geniuses, and none of that was on the stage. Maybe a more gifted actress could have done it, but it really wasn't in the material. And it was really one of the saddest experiences that I've ever had in the theater, because I could never show the audience. She was tough, often brutal, mean, conniving, clever, ruthless where the security and future of her children were concerned, very jealous of her husband, I'm not sure always even faithful. And I know if any of the Marx brothers' grandchildren and children they'll be furious with me. But that was the woman that I was prepared to play, and the script was something else. So it was impossible for me to put the two characters, the one I had researched and the one that they gave me to play, together. And the show failed.
Do we have any questions?
Speaking about social commentary, I'd like to just read to you a paragraph that was in today's Daily Bruin.
I can't quite hear you.
Okay. I'd like to read, talking about social commentary, I'd like to read to you just one paragraph from a review of Flap. That was
I haven't seen it yet.
What? You haven't seen Flap or the
No.
Daily Bruin?
I haven't seen Flap.
Okay,
I'm not sure I intend to.
Okay. I just want to read it, and I want to hear what your reply to this, or how you feel about it. Flap is perhaps the most despicable of all the exploitative now movies. To exploit middle-class college kids with Easy Rider and the current rush of revolution on-campus movies is one thing, with the kids standing in line to pay to be exploited. But the Indians in this country who won't even see Flap surely don't need to have their plights insidiously co-opted for an audience composed of those who ultimately must be the ones to help the Indian.
It might be true. I am sorry if it is, and that's a very inadequate word to say. I know Tony Quinn didn't expect the picture to be that. He's not that kind of a man. I played one of my better whores in it. I think the film is a tragedy. It cost millions of dollars. When I arrived from New York to do my role, which took 2 or 3 weeks, they had already been on location for many, many months. It cost Warner Brothers $6 or $7 million, and I understand that it's just it's terrible because they did have the opportunity. They had the money and the story and the actors to make a very revealing and poignant film about Indian life and the terrible things that we've done to the Indian nation. They didn't do it.
Just adding to that, we had Anthony Quinn here about a month ago, and we saw a scene from Flap, which you were in, that scene. And
Did I look thin?
you looked angry. And in answer to your question, I haven't seen Flap, but some Indian students on campus got together on that occasion, and they presented Anthony Quinn with an award for the film. So you can make of that what you will. Can we have the next question?
No, may I say something else? Is that the review? That's the Free Press.
That's a school paper.
School paper? What? Oh. I pass.
No, that was written by people who would like to write for the Free Press.
I see.
Can we have the next question, please?
Shelley, would you please comment on women's liberation?
Well, I think women's liberation is a male problem, not a female problem. I think women in this country are more and more ready to be first-class citizens. I think the more pressure that's put upon our society to accept women in all positions that they can fulfill, I think it is beginning to happen. I think the unhappy situation is that most men, unless it's the ones I know, are unable to accept through their conditioning, through the films and the literature of the last thousands of years. Women have been put in a subservient position, and somehow men test their I don't know what you're allowed to say in colleges these days. Their manhood on, that's daring, all right. You know what I mean. Not because men intellectually want to, but because they have been so conditioned that unless a woman makes them feel manly, she loses out somewhere. I've had 3 husbands, so I haven't done very well in making men feel manly, obviously. Next question.
You once said of Marilyn Monroe that if she'd been dumber, she might have made it. I'd like to know, I want you to continue on that.
Oh, no, I never said that to Marilyn Monroe. That
You
if
said
she
it-
was dumber?
No, if she had been dumber, she might have made it.
Oh, I know what you mean. Yes, that's not quite exactly right. What I mean by that, this is where my lack of college education is going to start bothering me, is the expression the grasp should be further than the reach. What is that expression? The reach exceeds the grasp. And Marilyn tried for more than she was capable of sustaining. Her reverence for, and that's the word I mean, reverence for intellectual accomplishment, and choice of men she associated with and women and what she loved was far beyond her education and background. And the 2 things are what really destroyed her. If she had been content to be I better be careful what I say. I'm going to get in trouble. Some of the other actresses I've worked with who are sort of happy in living in Hollywood and doing the same thing over and over again. And she did it very well. She was a marvelous comedian. If she had been happy in that background, I think she would have been alive. Unfortunately, I mean, she'd be alive now. Whether she'd have been alive spiritually or mentally, I don't know. But she, I knew her quite well in New York. I knew her here, but we got to know each other very well there. And when it failed her, when the intellectual and social and political life failed her there, and she came back and tried to readjust to the life here, she couldn't do it. That is what I meant. So if she'd have been dumber, I guess I guess it was picked up that way, but that's what I meant.
We have the next question.
In discussing your role as the mother of the Marx brothers, you talked about preparation for this role. You said you read everything as much as you could about this person. How did you prepare for the role of the blind girl's mother in Patch of Blue?
Well, boy, you kids really ask them. That was one of the most difficult films I ever did. I got an Oscar for it, but I don't know whether I deserved it. I think they really gave me the Oscar for Lolita, which I did deserve it for, in my opinion. Not quite true. Guy Green, who directed it, every morning I would come on the set with a reason why this woman was so bigoted, so one-sided. Sidney Poitier is a friend of mine, and I had to spit on him and hit him, and I mean, it was really tough for me to find the blindness of this one-dimensional character. And every morning I would trot on the set with a reason why this woman got this way, and say to the director, now the poverty that she, so forth and so on. He said, no, this woman was a whore. Her daughter is blind. She's guilty because she made her blind, and she is taking her guilt out in anger and further mistreatment of her child. And it was really tough, but he was right. He was right. There are some people who are so fixed and rigid in their prejudices and opinions that there's nothing you can do about it. It's hard to believe that. You hope every human being, as long as they're alive, there's hope. But some there isn't. And it was very, very tough for me to do that. And again, I read as much as I could about these kind of people. I watched people that I knew who had those kind of opinions and feelings, and did the scenes, and then I vomited. And that was how I did it. But it was a dreadful, dreadful role for me to play, because I could not accept the hatred and anger without showing its origins, which were poverty and desperation. But the director was right. That made the movie work, I think. If you would have had a sort of, you know, there's a joke, you probably know about it. I don't know how many of you saw The Young Lions, but when they put the whole picture together, Marlon Brando was aghast at his performance. He'd played a sympathetic Nazi. In England, they called it the golden, what they say, called him the golden Nazi. Now in each scene, you know, you shoot a movie in pieces. In each scene, he had tried to make the Nazi understandable. So when you put the whole picture together, he had a very understandable, nice Nazi. Where Maximilian Schell, who had experienced Nazism and understood them, didn't try to. And you saw a realer Nazi than you did in Marlon's performance, I think. Did I answer your question?
You mentioned Lolita here. You mentioned Lolita. Could you tell us something about making that film and about working with Stanley Kubrick?
Yes. I think Kubrick is the best, well, George Stevens, let me see. Well, Stanley Kubrick is one of the most astounding directors I've ever worked for. Now, one of the nice things about getting older, there are few of them. There are few, not many. But is that you, in retrospect, and you wish that you had known then what you knew now, the care and that he exerts on every single facet of the film. I had many lunches with Nabokov, and I never realized how he was brainwashing me about the woman in Lolita till I saw the film. Because the sort of a suburban wasp lady is rather difficult for me to play. I mean, if I sat down and said that's what I had to play. And I felt very good about that role and about that picture. And I would say he is an extraordinary filmmaker. I don't know how you feel about it, but to me 2001 is, I've seen it 3 or 4 times, is I thought it should have gotten the Oscar last year. And his concepts are so enormous, and he's just, for an actor, he's that very rare thing of being a director for an actor and also great with the camera and the technical aspects of it. I have been very lucky in my directors. Others not so lucky, but
this is sort of 2 questions. You mentioned that when you started out, you wanted to be
What?
when you started out, you wanted to be a theater actress rather than a film actress. And I wondered how you felt about that now. And also, which role in either film or theater did you enjoy the most?
well, after a while, you realize that you, if you're an artist and an actress, all the mediums. You must function in all the mediums. And I find in this sort of mechanical electronic age that you must constantly go back to the human beings, to the contact of a real audience. And in the theater, the most exciting role I ever had was Hatful of Rain. And I think in films, the best one was A Place in the Sun. And that was a long time ago.
I have a question. I'd like
I want to tell you a story. Okay. Quite recently, I'm trying to get this for the university here. I was at a spa in upstate New York, and losing weight. You know, Lillian Hellman says half the world is dieting and the other half is starving. I don't know which play that is, but it's true. And I was at this spa losing weight, and a lady sitting next to me, a very strange woman, kept staring at me. And the day before I left, she said, Miss Winters, my father was the district attorney in the Chester Gillette case that An American Tragedy was based on. Now, I don't know if that means anything to you youngsters, but Theodore Dreiser based An American Tragedy on an actual case that shook the world. It was in 1905. And her husband brought to this place where I was the court records, the coroner's report, and the love letters between Chester Gillette and this little girl, Georgina Brown. And it was terrifying to read. There are several movies made. You know, Eisenstein did a script of American Tragedy. I don't know whether Paramount ever used it or not. Sylvia Sidney, and very strange, the boy, you know, the boy who always has played An American Tragedy has always died tragically, both on the stage and the two films. Monty Cliff and, is it Wendell Holmes who did the first one? I can't remember. But anyway, I read these letters which were written in 1905 to this little girl who's pregnant and this boy who's a rich cousin, is suddenly taken an interest in him, and there's a possibility that he will be accepted into the affluent society. And in these yellow pages, it was like it was written yesterday. It was one of the most shattering experiences I ever had. I'm trying to get this lady to donate this scrapbook and all these letters and the coroner's report to the theater department here. I've written her a letter, and I've asked George Stevens where it should go. But what's the question?
The question is, I don't know how many people saw Johnny Carson that night, but I was wondering if you would care to talk about your first round knockout of David Susskind.
Well, David Susskind is what I call a liberal for all the wrong reasons. And I'm not really angry at him. I mean, in a total effect. But at that particular time, his put down of me was directed at all women, and especially Jewish women. And I've seen him do it many times, and I couldn't handle it. I mean, I did handle it, I think. I got so angry, and that I was very calm. And he has since tried to get me on his program and apologize. What I like about it mostly is it has made him change his attitude, I think, because I've watched some of his shows since New York. And I hope he thinks a little more clearly about his attitude about women. But it was a very lethal moment for me.
Could we have the next question, please? Right over there.
Miss Winters, I wish you would reminisce a little bit about that marvelous film you made with Charles Laughton and Bob Mitchum, The Night of the Hunter.
Well, a long time ago when UCLA was a small college, it really frightens me when I come out here now. Charles Laughton, right after the Joe McCarthy period, didn't work for a long time. I don't know that anybody had named him or he was in political trouble, but he didn't work. And he was not the kind of man to be inactive. So he started a theater group, which I think started here, and then we had to move somewhere else on La Cienega. And he began to teach Shakespeare and speech. And I had a Brooklyn accent, which I hope I don't have now. And I worked in his group. His analyses and understanding of Shakespeare was so remarkable in that he, I don't know who teaches it here now, but his connection of all human experience and well, it was really a very important year or two in my life. He then acquired Night of the Hunter. Man lives in Philadelphia. I can't, you know who wrote the book? Davis Grubb. And James Agee, and we met out in Santa Monica. And Mitchum. And he discussed the film, what he intended to do with the film. And two young men who had made a film here, I think it was Time Out of War, the two brothers, I'm rather blank today. They had made a film here, did the second unit work. Does anybody know their names? Sanders, that's right, they're two brothers. And we had a meeting about the style of the film. And I know Mitchum quite well, and he is capable of very strange things. Once he got mad at a producer, and he was legitimately angry at him. There was a thing of time. He was trying to hurry us, so he went over and peed on his Cadillac. He didn't say anything. That was his comment. But Mitchum had not really done very powerful work since G.I. Joe. I don't know how many of you know that, his first film. And in that picture, Laughton was able to give to Mitchum the sense of the connection between the religious fanatic's destructive force and the extent that it can go to. And the sad thing is that he died so soon after that film, because I think he would have been a great director. And the sad thing is, like Orson Welles has stopped directing, although I hear that Orson Welles is making a film now, very kind of quietly. I don't know whether, I hope it's true. But have you had him here yet?
No. Can you help us get him?
Yes, all you have to do is ask him.
I asked him, he won't come.
Really?
That's right.
Well, times change. That's too bad. But it's very hard to be specific about what Laughton gave to the actors. But I know for me and for Mitchum, he made us extend ourselves to attempt things that under ordinary circumstances we would never attempt.
We have time for just one more question, and then we have to go to our classes.
Yes, I'd like to know if you'd comment on a statement that was made recently by an actor regarding the state of theater in New York. He said that at the present time, off-Broadway is a tryout or audition for Broadway, and Broadway has become an audition for Hollywood, evidently inferring that this is no longer an end in itself, but it's sort of a springboard. Do you agree with this? What do you think?
Well, like all absolute statements, it's partially true, but not completely. You know, with things like Boys in the Band and Old Calcutta, it can become big business. But a new playwright, I don't know whether you're familiar with the effect of gamma rays. And there's another writer who's in rehearsal with a play now called Blue Leaves. I don't know. I know that actors who work off Broadway are more adventuresome. They try more interesting theater than they would ever on Broadway. And the sad thing about the actors' strike now, the off-Broadway actors' strike, and they well deserve the raise and they should get it. The sad thing, though, that will happen, which is what I think is the rub, is that the Stagehands Union is moving in now into off-Broadway, and that is not a good union. It is a, in Minnie's Boys, there were 30 stagehands, and there were 26 actors, and the stagehands averaged $400 or $500 a week, and the actors averaged $164. And that, and you know, it's a father-son union, and the rule is if a man can walk to the theater, he can work. So if somebody's 90 years old and hands you a feather, he works. And being an old union girl myself, it's very sad for me to see that happen to some unions. I don't know whether you kids are aware of it. I guess you are, because you study, is it sociology? But the whole living standard of America was established and raised by the union movement. The 8-hour day, our whole society was rescued by the union movement. And to see unions become like that is a sort of sad thing. But I don't think that's true of off-Broadway or Hollywood. I think there is still, you know, Odette said something about the theater. He said, there's nothing as beautiful as a waiting, dark theater. It is like a night without a star. And it is true. And if I can say one other thing, what made me want to write is I came across an expression of George Bernard Shaw's, a critique. He said, when the theater becomes a factor of thought and an elucidator of social consciousness, an armor against despair and darkness, and a temple in the ascent of man, it will fulfill its purpose in our society. And I still have hopes that our unelectronic, uncomputerized theater will be that and can be that.
Thank you very much.